Requiem of the Creedmoor by E.S. Couch.
Prologue. Far in the outer reaches of the Creedmoor Empire, the harvest moon's ghostly pale light cast eerie shadows among the late autumn trees, painting the lonely valley in spectral hues. Each step Sentinel Jaren took along the dark, haunting path was accompanied by the crunch of leaves and debris underfoot. A chill in the air tightened his grip on his spear, his eyes darting back and forth along the forest line, ever vigilant for the lurking threats of bandits, or worse, darklings. Commander Jaren, the youngest of the men whispered as he stepped closer. Jaren's eyes shifted to the young man before returning to the trail. Yes, Sentinel Marcus. His voice was calm, with a hint of fatherly authority. I just wanted to thank you, sir, for choosing me to accompany you in guarding the Magus on this journey. Marcus spoke nervously. It's truly an honor to join you, the hero of the Red Water, sir, but... He jumped, quickly readying his spear and pointing it into the forest. Easy, Sentinel. Jaren placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You're just jumping at shadows, my boy. Sir, something doesn't feel right. Marcus trembled slightly, his eyes fixed on the darkness among the trees. Permission to speak freely, Commander. Jaren smiled warmly. I don't see the harm in you speaking your mind, Sentinel. You won't get very far if you remain silent. Permission granted. Sir, speaking frankly, I feel as if we should leave this place. The three of us are not wanted here. By the grace of Onan, we should flee. Cold sweat ran down Marcus's cheek as his eyes stayed fixed on the shadows. Something is watching us. I can feel it. It's out there, waiting. Do you see signs of a darkling? Jaren asked, readying his spear and joining Marcus at his side. No, Commander. I don't see any signs of darklings. It's something else. I can't explain it. Just a feeling I've had ever since we stepped outside the hamlet. Marcus looked away from the forest and up to his commander. It's not right. We should go. Jaren lowered his spear and looked back at the worried sentinel. How long have you been with the unit now, son? His words were softer, tinged with genuine interest. I've been with the unit for half a season, Marcus stammered. I transferred here just after receiving my blessing from High Magus Oben at Montas. Jaren smiled warmly and placed his hand back on Marcus's shoulder. With so many young sentinels transferring in and out of the valley, it's hard to keep track of all your faces. I take it you have never ventured this far north in the Empire. No, sir. My family are farmers in the Golden Plains, Marcus explained. I am the first of my family to go to the academy and the first to become a sentinel. The valley is a dark place and can get to many people when they come here. Not even sentinels can shake the feeling of dread out here, myself included. Jaren looked back into the darkness. But I chose you because many of the other sentinels speak highly of you. They say you are quick on your feet and would never leave a comrade to die alone. I do not believe I could have chosen a better sentinel to watch my back and protect the Magus. I think I see something in you. Prove me right. Marcus's eyes filled with pride as he nodded to Jaren. Really, sir? Damn right. Come on, best not keep the Magus waiting too long out here. Jaren smirked. He tends to get a bit cranky when he's not on time. When we get back, I'll buy you a few drinks at the Bottomless Tankard. What do you say? That would be great, sir. Would it be all right if a few of the other sentinels joined us? Marcus's smile deepened as he found renewed courage. I don't see why not. Jaren patted Marcus on the back and pointed ahead. Go and scout ahead. See how much farther we are from the farm. Sentinel Marcus of the 12th Order. Marcus tipped his spear to his chest, a sign of respect among sentinels. "Yes, sir." He then raced off down the path. "And Sentinel," Jaren called out as Marcus started to take off, "ask yourself, who is the stag more afraid of, the hunter with his spear or the bear behind the hunter?" Marcus turned, a smile spreading across his face. "The damn bear, of course," he replied, then turned and sprinted off down the trail. Jaren smirked warmly as he watched the young sentinel diligently follow his orders and head off, then let out a long sigh. He too felt the same dread. Something was wrong with this night. Something unsettling about the journey they were making and what might lie ahead. Magus Tomok of the 4th Order of the Eye, dressed in his red and black robes, stepped up beside Jaren. "Is everything in order, Sentinel Jaren?" Tomok asked, his voice crisp and authoritative. Jaren waited until Marcus was out of earshot, not daring to question the Magus in front of the young man. "Yes, my lord. The valley just has him a bit shaken. He'll be fine." Tomok turned to face Jaren, his cold blue eyes sending a nervous chill down Jaren's spine. "Good," Tomok said, his tone steely. "Nothing needs to interfere with tonight. I've worked too hard and waited too long for a chance to study and gather proper samples of rot fever." "Far be it for me to question the wisdom of a magus," Jaren replied, turning to face Tomok directly. "But wouldn't it have been safer to send one of your prefects? There have been a hell of a lot of darkling sightings reported in this area. The boy and I could not possibly take on a band of orcs, elves, or whatever other forsaken creatures roam this unholy place." Tomok smirked, a cold amusement in his eyes. "Put your mind at ease, Sentinel Jaren of the 2nd Order. I am well aware of the reports," Tomok said, "but I will not have my last 4 autumns pissed away by a foolish prefect. If this truly is a case of rot fever, we can leave this of a hamlet and return to Potentia. I'm sick of listening to these peasants' constant whining and excuses. I will make a formal petition to our great emperor to have this part of the empire cleansed of its filthy rabble. Now let us return to the task at hand." Jaren nodded to the magus one last time. "Yes, my lord," he said, starting to step forward, but pausing as Tomok reached out and gripped his arm. "One last thing, Sentinel." Tomok's voice was colder and more calculated. "When my business is done here, you will kill the family and burn the home. Then you will slit Sentinel Marcus's throat." Jaren continued to face forward, staring down the path, as he heard Marcus's footsteps, signaling his return. "The boy won't be a problem, Magus. There's no need for that. He will do as he's told and keep silent about tonight." Jaren protested cautiously. "You misunderstand me, Sentinel Jaren of the 2nd Order," Tomok hissed. "I am sure you will keep silent, but I told you to choose the least remarkable among your sentinels, one who would go unnoticed if they did not return. This is not an order. It is a commandment." "It shall be done, my lord." A tinge of guilt wrapped around Jaren's heart, mingling with his hatred for this vile man. Jaren never wanted to be assigned to this post. He was the hero of the Red Water, a title he took pride in. He had saved countless lives during the largest uprising of Darklings in the last 10 springs. He had been the one to kill both the Orc and Elven leaders in a simultaneous fight. Now, he was just an errand boy for one of the most pretentious and self-centered magi in the Order of the Eye. However, this was a commandment from his lord, a task of the highest order that only a magus of the Eye could give. He would obey without question. "Commander Jaren, the farm is just up ahead, sir." Marcus says as he makes his, he rejoins Jaren and Magus Tomok. "I spotted a light through the front window. It looked to be a fire burning in the fireplace." "Good to know." Jaren's face, one of deep thought and consideration. "Is there anything else?" I should know before we continue on. Yes, there is, sir. Marcus nods head. I spotted a slave cabin, housing at least 10 darkling slaves. I got as close as I could without being spotted. They looked to be elves. Do you think it is still safe enough for the Magus to proceed, sir? Jaren glances his eyes towards Tomok, seeing the man with an impatient look upon his face and a hinge of anger in his eyes. It should be fine, Sentinel. Most farmers keep at least not many slaves in order to work the fields. I'm surprised you didn't know this, being that you grew up on a farm. Well, my mother always hated the thought of having darklings that close to the family, Marcus hastily says. She was worried that the elves would steal away my brothers and sisters for the night. Good mother. She must be very proud of her son setting out to protect women and children from wicked darklings. Jaren starts to move forward in the direction of the farm as a lone owl screech into the night. Let's get moving. I want to get this night over with. Yes, Marcus says with a warm smile as he takes his place beside Jaren and his spear at the ready. Then off to the bottomless tankard for those drinks. Yes, of course, Jaren says somberly as he continues to lead the men out of the forest line and into the freshly harvested wheat field. Marcus looked out over the farm, then back to Jaren. There's the farmhouse, and the slave cabin just beyond it. How can people live out here, with all the darklings and Onan only knows what else? Well, the land here is more fertile than in other parts of the Empire. Jaren continued to walk slowly as they passed an old well, its drawing bucket swaying gently in the wind, causing the metal crank to squeak. An apple tree planted here will produce 3 times more apples than one planted in the Golden Plains, and they taste far superior. But you already knew that. Yes, sir. Marcus leaned over the side of the well and peered inside. Of course. Jaren stopped and looked in the direction of the slave cabin. But in truth, many of the folk who live here cling to the old ways. While many follow the ways of Onan, a lot of them prefer to worship the gods of old. Heretics! Marcus gasped. Why doesn't the church drive them out? It's because the church has grown lazy, Magus Tomok interjected with disgust, joining the conversation. For 50 winters we have held this land, and in that time the church has done nothing. It's a disgrace and a blatant disrespect, not only to our great emperor, but to Onan himself. Suddenly, a loud wail of pain emanated from within the house, just as Jaren placed his foot on the creaky wooden porch, causing the 3 of them to fall silent. Marcus turned and pointed his spear towards the slave cabin, while Jaren and Tomok stepped up to the front door. Sentinel Marcus, stand guard out here and alert the Magus and me at the first sign of danger. Jaren commanded with authority, raising his hand to the door. If the danger becomes too great or too dire, you will abandon me and ensure Lord Magus Tomok's safe return to the hamlet. You are not to leave his side until he is back in his quarters at the tower. Do you understand this order? Yes, sir, Marcus replied, taking up a position with his weapons at the ready. I will abide by these orders or fall upon my sword in my failure. Jaren slammed his hand against the wooden door, causing it to shake in its frame. Dutiful subject of the Emperor, I come in the name of his greatness, so that his eye may fall upon you. He sends me in your time of need to render aid or grant his justice. Open the door. The door quickly opened to reveal the silhouette of a man standing in the doorway, firelight from the hearth shining brightly behind him. Is it really you, Magus? The man pleaded as he stepped closer. Jaren lowered his spear, pointing it at the man, ready to defend against any threat. You shall step no closer to the Magus subject, or I shall run you through. The man let out a long, surprised gasp and stepped back from the tip of Jaren's spear. I mean no harm, Sir Sentinel, he exclaimed, realizing his mistake. We have prayed to Onan and sent letters to the tower. I have sinned against Onan by thinking he had abandoned us. But he has proven me wrong and shown his mercy in our final hours of need. Be at ease, Sentinel Jaron, hero of the Red Water, Tomok said, placing his hand softly under the hard oak shaft of the spear and gently lifting it away from the man. This is a faithful child of Onan. He brings no harm to me that you would not bring upon yourself. So, I tell you, be at ease, my ever-diligent sentinel. Jaron relaxed and held his spear upward as he watched Tomok smile warmly at the farmer. Tomok then gently took the man's hand like a sympathetic friend. Yes, child of Onan, I am Magus Tomok. But you may call me Tomok. You need not address me with formalities. I have come here to help you. Might I ask your name? Tomok's tone was gentle and sympathetic. My name is Benjamin, he said with a sigh of relief as he relaxed. But most people just call me Ben, Magus. Now, Benjamin, I said you could call me Tomok. Tomok's smile deepened as he patted Ben's hand. In your letters to me, you spoke of your daughter having rot fever. Is this true? It is. Ben began to breathe heavily, tears streaming down his cheeks. It's true, Tomok. She suffers greatly. She is our only child, and my poor wife hasn't left her side in days. I fear she won't make it through the night. Ben placed his head on Tomok's chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Please help her, Tomok. We can't lose her like this. I'll pay anything, give anything you ask. Just save my little girl. Jaron clenched his jaw in anger as he watched Tomok roll his eyes in disgust. Come on, take me to her so I can heal her and give her back to you whole. You owe only loyalty and faith to Onan. Yes, right this way, please hurry, Ben said, racing off into the house. Tomok looked back at Jaron and said in a sarcastic tone, Come, Jaron, let us end this poor, faithful family's suffering. Tomok turned and walked into the house, leaving Jaron on the porch alone with Marcus. Jaron glanced back at the young sentinel, nodded one last time, and then followed Tomok into the small farmhouse. I won't be able to use my spear in here, the space is too tight, Jaron whispered to himself as he looked around the room. Old family tapestries, likely dating back at least 6 generations, adorned the walls, alongside religious symbols that displayed the family's deep devotion to the church. The furniture was simple and functional, reflecting the typical style and modesty found in most rural farm homes. This was clearly a home for a humble and devout family. Did you say something, Sentinel? Tomok asked quietly, as the two men gradually became aware of the staggering heat within the room. I said, I won't be able to use my spear in here if something goes wrong, my lord, Jaron replied, wiping perspiration from his brow as they followed the farmer. Then prop the damn thing against the wall and use your sword if need be, Tomok snapped, also feeling the uncomfortable heat. What's that, Tomok? Ben asked, turning to face them from the bedroom door. Oh, nothing, Tomok said with a smile. Sentinel Jaron and I were just admiring the lovely decor of your home. He wiped sweat from his brow. But might I ask, how long have you had that fire burning? It's late autumn, but it's not that cold outside. I just lit the fire before you arrived, Tomok. I was preparing to make some grey root tea. Ben placed his hand on the wooden handle, holding the door closed, and lifted it slowly. The heat is coming from her. An oppressive wave of heat boiled out of the room, nearly knocking both Jaron and Tomok back. It was like opening the door to the sunrooms of the Great Tower, used to torture dissidents and blasphemers. Despite the heat, an icy chill ran up Jaron's spine as he peered into the room. Onan? Jaron gasped. Outside, Marcus leaned back against the wooden column of the porch, taking up a more relaxed position as a new coldness settled in around him. He swept his eyes over the landscape, trying his best to stay alert to any possible threat. However, his thoughts kept drifting back to the hero of the Red Water. It had been 10 winters since that night, the night the river froze over, cutting the town off from reinforcements, giving elves and orcs the opportunity for their attack. Many families, mostly common people, good, faithful people, had their life's blood shed that night. It had been the worst uprising in 100 winters. No one had expected that elves and orcs would work together in such a way, given their general hatred for one another. But as they say, a man dying of thirst will drink from the water of a latrine. I should tell him the truth, who I really am, Marcus said poignantly to himself as the squeaking from the well grew louder and more rhythmic. The shame of his lie weighed heavily upon him. He was not from the Golden Plains and knew little to nothing about farming. It just felt like the right thing to say. He didn't want his commander to think differently of him. The admiration and pride he felt for Sentinel Jaren were tangible to him. It was what drove him to become a sentinel. He had worked hard, and despite what others had said, he had made it through the academy, albeit ranking last and spending an extra year to be granted his blessing. Not only had he become a sentinel, but he was also chosen by the very man who had set him on this path to help protect a Lord Magus in the darkness of the valley. Marcus jumped from his relaxed position into a ready stance as the door to the slave cabin swung open. Cautiously, he began to walk in the direction of the cabin, his spear pointing firmly towards the open door. "Stay inside your dwellings, darklings. No one has summoned you," he shouted in a commanding voice. "I will not hesitate to put each of you down. Now close your door and go back to bed." But there was no reply, not even a whisper, except for the persistent squeaking coming from the well. Peering closely, Marcus saw figures cloaked in shadow, their eyes glinting pale gold in the moonlight. "Listen here, knife ears. If you even think about coming out of your dwelling, I promise to Onan." His oath was cut off by the growing screams and moaning from within the house. Marcus began to retreat slowly toward the farmhouse as 10 slender elves, adorned in ragged slave garb, emerged into the yard. 4 males, 4 females, and 2 young elflings. Standing, side by side, they stared in Marcus's direction, their beautiful but haunting eyes reflecting the light of the moon back at him. I'm warning you, Guy. Get back into your quarters," he said nervously, taking another step back. "Stop looking at me." Marcus took a deep breath and steeled himself, renewing his courage. "I command you, in the name of the Emperor." He stepped forward and gripped his spear tighter. "Stop looking at—" He paused, as a realization dawned on him. "You're not looking at me," he said, now in a much calmer tone, noticing the fearful expressions on their faces. Turning, he looked back at the farmhouse. The screams had not become louder, but they were now more pronounced. The bear. Jaren stepped cautiously into the room ahead of Tomok. The air was acrid, and the smell of rotting eggs permeated the space. The heat was barely tolerable. Scanning for any potential danger, Jaren's eyes were drawn to the young girl lying in the bed, no older than 14 springs. Her long black hair framed her delicate face, which was contorted in pain as she gasped and moaned, clutching her swollen belly. Her complexion was deathly pale, almost translucent, with blackened veins pulsing beneath the skin. Kneeling at her bedside was a woman who resembled an older version of the girl, sobbing and praying for her daughter. Kneeling at the side of the bed and wrapping his arms around his wife, Ben wept. "Maria, Onan has answered our prayers," he cried, holding her tightly. "Our letters reached Magus, and he has come to save her. Our daughter will be whole again, he has promised." Carefully, Jaron moved to the bedside opposite the grieving but hopeful parents. Maria looked up at Tomok with tear-filled eyes as he stood in the doorway. "Amagus, can it really be true?" She began to sob harder and cried out, "Oh, great Onan, please don't torment me with false dreams of hope. I beg you, please let this be real. Please, I beg of you, let this be true." "This is no dream, child of Onan." Tomok approached the pleading woman as she fell to his feet and began kissing his filthy boots. Once again, Jaron held back his anger and disgust as Tomok's face showed the sick pleasure he took in seeing these poor grieving parents begging at his feet. Jaron looked back at the girl. He knew that if this was rot fever, she would be dead by morning. He had never witnessed the disease personally, but reports said it came on quickly. The victim went from being healthy to bedridden within the first hour of falling ill. Their skin would turn an ashy grey colour and start to decay like a rotting corpse, but they would still be alive, hence the name rot fever or corpse fever. Rumour had it that a man with the disease was still alive after 6 days, even though his head was nothing but a skull. However, Tomok had received the letter 3 days ago. Where was the rotting flesh? The girl was clearly sick and suffering, but apart from her pale complexion and blackened veins, her flesh was intact. Clearly the reports had to be exaggerated. "I am Magus Tomok. I take it you are the child's mother," Tomok said, looking down at the woman at his feet, then to the bed. "Yes, she is my child. Please help her," Maria pleaded. "What is her name?" Tomok asked, tilting his head in apparent confusion. "Her name is Sophia," Maria replied, her voice trembling as she looked back at her daughter, then up at Tomok. "Ah, yes, sweet little Sophia. I prayed for her with each step I took on my journey here." He leaned in closer, inspecting the girl's condition. "Wait." Tomok's facade of warmth and concern vanished, revealing his underlying wrath. "This isn't rot fever." "Wow. What do you mean it's not rot fever?" Ben stammered, looking up at the now enraged Magus alongside his wife. "What else could it be?" "You can't be that foolish, you filthy, disgusting little people." Tomok raised his foot and slammed it into Maria's chest, knocking the wind out of her and sending her crashing into Ben. They both fell to the floor. "You dare waste my time with something like this? I am not a fucking midwife, you ungrateful peasants. I even graciously let you kiss the cow shit from my boots. The girl is clearly pregnant and about to give birth," he spat, pointing accusingly at Ben. "Clearly you are the cause of your daughter's current condition." Ben's eyes widen and filled with anger and disgust at Tomok. Seeing this, Jaron reaches for his sword and prepares to draw down on the man. However, Ben's rage is quickly snuffed out by the frightful wrath of Tomok. "I would never do something like that, my lord. It would not only damn my soul to the deepest parts. If not yourself, then perhaps one of the darkling slaves you keep," Tomok hissed, his voice dripping with anger. "This little whore has probably just bent over one too many times behind the woodshed, but this is no concern of mine. You have wasted my time tonight." Tomok turned to Jaron, a snarl on his face. "My business is done here. Carry out your commandment." Without hesitation, Jaron gripped the hilt of his sword and began to draw the blade. But before he could fully unsheath it, Ben, in a desperate act, grabbed the fabric of Sophia's nightgown. With 2 quick tugs, he ripped it open, exposing her chest to both Jaron and Tomok. "Look, Magus, please just look at her." Jaron and Tomok were both taken aback by Ben's desperate action. They stared at Sophia's bare chest as her breathing grew heavier and her moans deepened. The perspiration on her skin began to boil, rising off her flesh as steam. Jaren glanced at Tomok. This isn't rot fever. Then what is it? True, the girl is pregnant, but I've never seen anything like this, let alone heard of it. My lord, what is happening? Tomok's eyes were now fixated on the girl, his curiosity and interest freshly piqued. I do not know, this is something new. You see, my lord, Ben shouted, while Maria, still gasping for air from Tomok's kick, struggled to her knees. We're not wasting your time. You must help her. Please, I beg of you. Ignoring Jaren's warning, Tomok slowly reached out his hand as if to touch the girl's flesh. Wait, Magus, don't touch the girl, Jaren cautioned. Snapping his head up, Tomok gave Jaren a look of authority and defiance. He dragged his fingers along the girl's skin just below her breast. A sound like sizzling pig fat rose from his fingertips, causing him to recoil in pain. Damn you, Sentinel! Jaren smiled with a hint of satisfaction as Tomok examined the burnt flesh on his hand. I did try to warn you, my lord, he said, a touch of sarcasm in his voice. Sophia's eyes snapped open, glaring at the individuals occupying her room. She looked at each of them, not with relief or pleasure, but with a gaze that seethed with contempt, as if she saw nothing but cockroaches scurrying across the floor. In that instant, her pain and agony were replaced with cold hatred. Tamel sintuned elgeheganiten ridertsenhad, nosterwen eos skukprin, she spat in a maniacal tone. Jaren, unsure of the girl's words, stepped back from the bed. What language is that? Gibberish. That is no spoken language, Tomok replied, shaking his head in disbelief. The girl must be delusional, clearly a symptom brought on by the disease. Sophia slammed her head back onto her pillow, causing the bed to shake as her pain returned. He's coming back, she moaned, gasping for air and clutching her swollen belly. He will build his kingdom with the ashes of our own. He will rest upon the molten stone of our castles, and our bones shall be his treasure. Mama, I'm scared. Who did this to you? Maria asked desperately, hoping that knowing the identity of her daughter's tormentor could somehow save her. Was it a darkling? No. He is far beyond darklings, as they are beyond you. He is ancient and wise. He has seen the rise and fall of empires and kingdoms long forgotten by man, Sophia wailed. I dare not. Speak his name. He stole me away on a moonless night, and I gave myself to him upon stone and dried blood, so that I would be his lover, and now, his mother. Marcus turned back to the elves as the gentle wind began to pick up in strength, sending loose blades of wheat, dropped during the harvest, swirling into the air. The scent of charred wood followed, carried by the increasingly howling wind. The elven slaves, visibly shaken by the unfolding events, stood frozen in place like rabbits caught in the gaze of a hawk. Desperate to understand, Marcus ran towards one of the elven men and grabbed him by his burlap shirt. "What is going on?" he shouted, his words barely audible over the ever-growing howl of the wind. "Tell me, what is happening?" The elf remained silent, but he broke his gaze away from the house and looked at Marcus with a mixture of fear and pity. Then he glanced back towards the house, the mouth of the beast that Jaren and the Magus had willingly entered. Marcus let go of the elf and turned back towards the house, remembering his orders. Protect the Magus and return him safely to the tower. He took off running, dropping his spear and abandoning it on the ground as he drew his sword. Suddenly, without warning, the wind stopped instantly. Wheat and other debris hung in the air for a brief moment before falling to the ground. Stopping briefly and looking around at the falling debris, Marcus took one last look at the elves before heading for the front door, determined to carry out his orders. The elves began to chant rhythmically in a lonely but haunting tone, speaking the forbidden language of the elves, words that Marcus did not understand. Sophia let out a howling scream and ripped the fabric away from her belly as the heat in the room reached a new high. A small woven tapestry depicting the family and happier days erupted into flames, while infant fingertips bulged along her belly. Jaren, unable to act, watched in horror as the quaint room turned into an unforgiving and nightmarish hellscape. Ben and Maria screamed in grief and horror as small fingertips pushed through the delicate, smooth skin of their daughter's belly. Tomok watched with a sick look of wonder and awe on his face. Smoking hot blood began to pool along the bedside and onto the wooden floor, then burst into flames. The girl screamed one last time as the skin of her lovely face started to bubble and melt slowly like candle wax while the child crawled from the corpse of its mother. Jaren, now running fully on instinct, drew his sword in one quick motion and brought it down with all his strength. "Run, Magus! Get out of here!" The sound of hardened steel shattering rang out as Jaren's blade met with the flesh of the child. Tomok fell back onto the floor, his robes now ablaze as his own terror set in. Thinking quickly, Jaren averted his eyes from the bed and down to Tomok. Dropping the remains of his now useless sword, he raced to his lord and tried to help him to his feet. Ben and Maria, engulfed in flames, wailed in agony. "We need to get out of here or die. Now get to your feet, Magus." A blast of searing hot air blew across the room, slamming the door shut firmly. Jaren gripped the handle and pulled at the door, trying to open it. However, the heat caused the door to bulge and stick firmly in the frame. The air, nearly unbreathable, burned at their lungs as they began to suffocate. "Marcus!" Jaren shouted, followed by a fit of coughing. "Help us!" Jaren falls to the floor, coughing and gasping for air as the room begins to darken. Despite the fire blazing all around him, a welcoming cold starts to set in. Visions of a heroic young man pulling a magus as flames lick against his skin with pronounced screams of the dying carry him off into a cold sleep. The brilliant orange colour of first light broke over the valley as Jaren took in a deep breath of the cool morning air. His body ached with the all-too-familiar pain of battle, but he was alive. Next to his bedroll was a clean flask of fresh water and a plate of food, a chunk of chicken with goat cheese, the most common meal a sentinel would find after a fight. However, hungry as he was, he could not find his appetite for the food, not after the horrors he had witnessed. But the water found its way to his lips, each drop as precious as the last. "Ah, back with us, Sentinel Jaren?" Tomok said smoothly. "I thought we might have lost you. That would have truly been inconvenient for me if I came back to the tower alone. There would have been too many questions." Jaren looked around his surroundings. "Where is Sentinel Marcus?" His eyes were still a bit hazy. "And why am I still alive?" "The young sentinel would have made you proud," Tomok said smugly. "After he pulled me from the fire, he went back in at his own personal risk and saved your life. I have tasked him with searching the remains of the house for any sweet fruit that I might collect. With any luck, the child will still be alive." Jaren's anger and spite spilled over. "You can't be serious, that thing was a fucking darkling. If it is alive, it must be killed," he shouted, nearly jumping to his feet to strangle the life from this wicked man. "Hold your tongue, Jaren," Tomok points. "Going back to the tower alone would be an inconvenience, and it would be just that, an inconvenience. You would be wise to remember that." In the distance, Marcus shouts, "I think I found something." "Good, my boy, Sentinel Jaren and I are on our way," Tomok shouts back, in a tone much like that of a teacher giving praise to his prized pupil. "Now, let us see what the boy has found." Defeated, Jaren rises to his feet and follows behind Tomok, to the burnt remains of the farmhouse. Looking in the direction of the slave cabin, he asks, "What became of the Darkling? Did they escape?" "There is no need." Tomok pointed to a willow tree at the edge of the field. "The matter has been resolved." Looking in that direction, Jaron let out a long sigh as he made out 10 figures swaying in the gentle morning breeze at the end of ropes. "You had Marcus hang them? Why? They might have been able to tell us what happened here, my lord." Tomok smiled lightly as they came to a stop just at the ruins of the farmhouse. "No, they did that to themselves. Silly creatures. It was not like I was going to stop them. And besides, I was quite certain they did not know anything that I have already perceived. Now go help your sentinel." "Yes, my lord." Jaron stepped out on the smouldering ground, the heat penetrating through his boots as the ground crunched underneath his feet. "Good to see you awake, sir," Marcus warmly greeted him. "I hope that you're feeling well. I was a bit worried that we had lost you." "I would have been lost if not for you, Sentinel." Jaron surveyed the ground, then spotted the remains of his spear, a lone spearhead gleaming in the morning light. "Thank you. I owe you a debt." "You owe me nothing, sir." Marcus watched as Jaron knelt to retrieve the spearhead, then pulled back his hand as he felt the heat radiating from it. Jaron looked back up at Marcus. "Is this all you have found?" "No, sir." Marcus turned and walked toward a spot a few feet from where the spearhead rested. "There is something moving under the ash." Jaron and Marcus stepped forward and watched as the smoke, ash and coals began to shift. "I noticed it moving but did not want to disturb it until you or the Magus could see it." Jaron's hand started to shake as he reached for his sword, only to find the empty sheath. He had hoped it would have perished in the fire. Breathing heavily, he looked to Marcus. "Ready your sword and see what it is." Marcus pulled his sword from its sheath and held it in one hand as he took a knee next to it. Then, with his free hand, he brushed away the ash and coals to reveal the unmarked flesh of a newborn baby boy. "A miracle of Onan!" Dropping his sword, he started to free the infant, despite the coals being still hot enough to burn skin. "Marcus, put the child down," Jaron said cautiously, as he looked at Marcus's sword lying on the ground. "That's not a human child, Sentinel." Marcus turned to face Jaron, the child sleeping quietly in his arms. "It's just a child, sir. He can't harm anyone. Is this not a miracle?" "It is a miracle, Sentinel Marcus," Tomok said as he approached behind Jaron. "Truly a wonder of the Great One. Here, hand me the boy." Jaron watched as Marcus carefully placed the child into Tomok's arms. "But, my lord," he protested, as a sick feeling started to rise in his chest. "You damn well know that is a Darkling." Jaron lashed out. Marcus looked between the two men, confused at the animosity and threatening tone in Jaron's voice. "Sentinel Jaron, easy commander. I'm sure you're just mistaken." Marcus glanced toward the slave cabin and saw his spear still where he had left it. Tomok smiled smugly while ignoring Jaron. Slowly, he brushed his fingers over the infant's cheek, and with a subtle hint of the Magus's magic, the soot fell away from the child, leaving him clean and free of filth. Turning away from Jaron, Tomok removed a red cloth from a small bag at his side and began to wrap the boy. "Damn you, Tomok!" Jaron shouted, his eyes like blades in the back of the Magus. "You will look at me! That is a fucking Darkling, and by all rights it must die. If you try and stop me, I will cut you down as well." Hearing the threat in his commander's words, Marcus slowly began to step behind Jaron and carefully raised his arm, outstretched toward his spear. "Sentinel Jaron, of the Second Order and hero of the Red Water, I say to you, Stand down, sir. Please don't say anything you would regret. His eyes were fixed on his belligerent commander. Tomok said in a low tone, "Carry out your commandment, Sentinel," as he started to walk away with the child. Jaren reached out with his hand, and with a touch of will, summoned Marcus's sword from the ground into his open hand. "I told you to look at me, Tomok," he said, swinging the blade toward the back of Tomok's neck. The tip was only a hair's width from the flesh. "I will not allow you to leave with that thing, that abomination." Shocked by Jaren's actions, Marcus called forth his spear and pointed it firmly at Jaren's back. "Please, Sentinel Jaren, I might not understand what is going on, but I cannot allow you to harm Magus Tomok. I beg of you, sir, lower your sword." Ignoring Marcus's warning, Jaren said to Tomok, "The boy might be able to end my life with his spear in my back, but not before I take you and that thing to the pits of damnation with me. Now turn around and face me." Jaren and Marcus both watched as Tomok turned to face Jaren and took a slight step forward, allowing the tip of the blade to rest against his exposed throat. "I told you to carry out your commandment." "Sentinel Jaren, please. You were the hero of the Red Water. You saved so many children on that night." Marcus pleaded, but firmly held his spear to Jaren's back. "I lied to you, sir. I am not from the Golden Plains. My family were fishermen along the banks of the Red Water. They were caught in the slaughter, and only I was left alive. It was you who pulled me from the freezing water and gave me my purpose in life. I'm sorry I never told you. I did not want you to think of me differently. But you are my hero, sir. I don't want to kill you, but I must protect the Magus." "You need not apologize to me, Marcus." Jaren let out a short sigh. "I knew who you were the moment I laid eyes on you. I've never forgotten any of your faces, the fear in your eyes, or the look of relief and wonder you gave me that night. I've seen you looking at me that way more than once." Still holding the sword with his left arm, Jaren let his right arm drift down to his side. "I'm sorry that I put you in this predicament, but this is the way it must be. I can't change it, and neither can you. I'm truly sorry, Sentinel." "I am sorry too, Commander," Marcus said, as Jaren flicked his finger on his right hand. A flash of silver tinged with scarlet red zipped through the air, making a whistling sound. The spearhead found its mark and buried itself into the remains of the fireplace. Marcus released his grip on the shaft of his spear and reached for his throat. His lifeblood flowed out onto his uniform. Dropping the sword, Jaren quickly turned and caught the dying sentinel in his arms. "I'm so sorry, but you were doomed the moment I chose you to be my second. I will raise my glass to you and tell the other sentinels of your bravery and the sacrifice you made to protect the Magus." He watched as Marcus's eyes turned milky white. Bowing his head, he laid the sentinel carefully down onto the ground. "Well done, Sentinel Jaren," Tomok said as he looked down at him. "What does that put you at? 11 or 12 commandments?" Jaren looked up at Tomok, still holding the child. It places me at 12, my lord." "Yes, just one more commandment from completing all 13, making you a free lord." Tomok smiled. "What would you say if I were to grant you that last commandment? Freeing you from your oath as a sentinel, you could go back to the Red Water, reunite with your wife, and become lord over that land, only answering to the Emperor himself." Jaren looked at Tomok in shock. It had been a long time since a sentinel had completed 13 commandments. Not a single sentinel had come close to accomplishing that feat in Jaren's lifetime, now at the age of 35 summers. "Would you do that for me, Lord Magus?" His voice almost a whisper. "I don't see why not. You have served the Empire dutifully, not to mention myself." Tomok ran his fingers over his throat, a shiver running through him as he thought back to the blade that was there just moments ago. Despite your transgressions. Forgive me, my lord. Jaren let out a long, defeated sigh. I forgot my place. It is no matter. Now stand. Tomok's voice sounded a bit amused. With his head bowed, Jaren stood before his lord, ready to take up his final commandment. He took in a deep breath, held it for a moment, and released it. What would you have of me, Lord Magus Tomok, of the Fourth Order of the Eye? Sir Sentinel Jaren, of the Second Order of the Hand, and Hero of the Red Water, I give you your final commandment. I hear that both you and your wife are without child. Tomok looked down into his arms at the sleeping boy. Is this true? It is, Jaren answered. Then hold out your arms and take this child. Your commandment will be to protect and raise this child as if he were of your own blood. Tomok placed the boy into Jaren's arms. Until he comes of age and attends the Academy of Montos, do you accept this commandment? It shall be done, Lord Tomok. I swear it, Jaren said, looking down at the pale white face of the sleeping infant. This was the commandment of his lord, greater than any order given. He would obey without question. End of prologue. Document outline. Prologue.